The Millionaire CEO stares at the woman across the fountain, his former assistant who's now his boss. She just told him the 3-year-old boy playing nearby is his biological son. The child he never knew existed. The pregnancy he fired her for 3 years ago. And the toddler is calling another man, Daddy. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The conference room fell silent as Marcus Ashford's fist struck the mahogany table. His watch, worth more than most people's cars, caught the afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Manhattan. 50 stories below, people moved like ants, unaware that in this glass tower, a woman's life was about to shatter. Lily Chen stood across from him, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She'd been his executive assistant for 3 years, and in that time, she'd learned to read his moods like weather patterns. Today was a Category 5 hurricane. I don't pay you to make excuses, Miss Chen. I pay you to be available 24/7. That's what an executive assistant does. His voice was ice wrapped in silk, the tone he used right before he destroyed someone's career. Mr. Ashford, I understand your frustration, but I was at the hospital. My doctor said, I don't care if the Pope himself called you. When I need you at a meeting with Japanese investors who flew 16 hours to be here, you show up. Instead, I had to fumble through presentations like some unprepared intern. He straightened his cufflinks, each small movement deliberate and controlled. Do you have any idea how much that deal was worth? $200 million. And you weren't there to provide the documents I needed. Lily's stomach twisted. She'd prepared those documents weeks in advance, organized them in 3 different formats, and sent backup copies to his phone and email. But saying that now would only make things worse. Marcus Ashford didn't accept contradictions. He accepted perfection, and when he didn't get it, someone paid the price. The documents were in your briefcase, sir. The blue folder marked with yellow tabs. I also emailed them to you at 6 a.m. yesterday with the subject line, Japan Acquisition Meeting Materials. His jaw tightened. For a split second, she saw realization flicker across his face. He'd forgotten. Or more likely, he'd been too focused on his golf game that morning to check. But Marcus Ashford never admitted mistakes. That's beside the point. Your absence created uncertainty. In business, uncertainty is unacceptable. He walked to the window, his back to her now, silhouette sharp against the cityscape. I've built Ashford Industries from the ground up. My father gave me a failing textile company, and I turned it into a tech empire worth $3 billion. I did that by demanding excellence from everyone, including myself. Especially myself. Lily felt the nausea rising again. Morning sickness, the doctor had called it, though it seemed to hit her at all hours. She'd been dealing with it for 2 weeks, trying to hide it, trying to stay perfect for him. She'd known this moment was coming, had rehearsed the conversation 100 times in her mind. But standing here now, with her job and her future hanging by a thread, the words stuck in her throat. Mr. Ashford, there's something I need to tell you. He turned, his expression carved from granite. Marcus was 42, movie star handsome in that polished, ruthless way that made him a fixture in business magazines and gossip columns. His dark hair was graying at the temples, which only made him look more distinguished. Women threw themselves at him at charity galas. Men envied everything about him. And Lily had spent 3 years watching him destroy anyone who showed weakness. Unless it's your resignation, I'm not interested. The words hit her like a physical blow. Sir, I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside, a helicopter passed by the window. Someone laughed in the hallway. The air conditioning hummed. And Marcus Ashford's face became a mask. I see. 2 words, flat and emotionless. He walked back to his desk, sat down, and opened his laptop as if she'd just told him it might rain tomorrow. And the father? That's not... It's complicated. Everything's complicated when poor planning is involved. His fingers moved across the keyboard, not even looking at her. How far along? 8 weeks. And you plan to keep it? It wasn't a question. Lily straightened her shoulders, feeling something shift inside her. Anger, maybe. Or just clarity. Yes, I'm keeping my baby. Then we have a problem. He closed the laptop and folded his hands on the desk, the gesture of a man about to deliver a verdict. Ashford Industries requires complete dedication from its executive team. An executive assistant to the CEO isn't a 9-to-5 position. It requires sacrifice, focus, availability at all times. He paused, letting the words sink in. A child would compromise that commitment. Other companies manage to accommodate working mothers. I've researched the policies. I'm not other companies. I'm Ashford Industries, and I set the standards here. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. I'm going to make this simple for you, Miss Chen. You can either commit fully to this position, which means making different choices about your personal situation, or you can pursue motherhood and find employment elsewhere. The room tilted. Lily grabbed the back of the chair to steady herself. Are you asking me to choose between my job and my baby? I'm asking you to prioritize, something you clearly struggled with yesterday when you chose a doctor's appointment over a $200 million deal. The meeting was at 2 p.m. My appointment was at 9 a.m. I was back in the office by 11. Not good enough. He picked up his phone, already moving on to the next item on his agenda. I need your decision by end of business today. Stay and meet my expectations, or leave and pursue other priorities. I'll have HR prepare a severance package either way. Lily's vision blurred. 3 years. She'd given him 3 years of her life. She'd missed her sister's wedding because he needed her at a conference in Singapore. She'd worked through Christmas, Thanksgiving, her own birthday. She'd learned his coffee preferences, his meeting rhythms, the names of his mistresses so she could send flowers and jewelry to smooth over his breakups. She'd made his life effortless while slowly erasing her own. And now, carrying a child she already loved more than anything, she was being erased completely. I don't need until end of business. Her voice came out steady, stronger than she felt. I quit. Effective immediately. Marcus looked up, genuine surprise crossing his face for the first time. People didn't quit on him. He fired them, discarded them, but they never left voluntarily. His ego couldn't quite process it. You're making a mistake. The job market isn't kind to pregnant women, and your resume will show you couldn't handle the pressure of working for me. That's not a good look. Maybe not. Lily unclipped her security badge and set it on his desk. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. And in a few months, I'll be able to look at my child and know I chose them over someone who sees people as disposable assets. She turned and walked toward the door, each step feeling like both an ending and a beginning. Her hand was on the handle when his voice stopped her. You'll regret this, Miss Chen. Pride doesn't pay rent or buy diapers. Call me in a week when reality sets in. Lily didn't turn around. Goodbye, Mr. Ashford. The elevator ride down 50 floors felt endless. She watched the numbers descend, each one taking her further from the life she'd built. When the doors opened to the lobby, she stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine and finally let herself cry. 3 years later, the same Manhattan skyline glittered under a different kind of light. Autumn had painted the city gold and red, and the air carried that crisp promise of new beginnings. In a different tower, just 4 blocks from Ashford Industries, Lily Chen sat in a corner office that rivaled Marcus's in size and surpassed it in style. The nameplate on her desk read, Lillian Chen Morrison, Chief Operating Officer, Meridian Ventures. On the credenza behind her, framed photos told a story Marcus had never bothered to learn. Lily with her arms around a little boy with dark curls and curious eyes. Lily accepting an award for Young Executive of the Year. Lily shaking hands with the mayor at a charity event. And one photo that didn't include her at all. Just the little boy, laughing as he splashed in a fountain, pure joy captured forever. Her assistant knocked and entered. Ms. Chen, the acquisition documents from legal just arrived. Also, Mr. Morrison called. He'll pick up Ethan from daycare if you're running late. Thank you, Rachel. Tell him I should be done by 6. Lily signed the documents with practiced efficiency, each signature a small revolution. 6 months ago, she'd been a senior analyst at a mid-tier investment firm, working her way up through sheer determination and the kind of hunger only failure can create. Then Meridian CEO had noticed her presentation on tech sector acquisitions and offered her the COO position on the spot. The job came with a challenge. Meridian was positioning itself to acquire Ashford Industries, which had been struggling since a series of bad investments and a public scandal involving Marcus's latest affair with a board member's daughter. The press had been brutal, investors were nervous, and Marcus, for the first time in his charmed life, was vulnerable. Lily had accepted the position knowing exactly what it meant. Karma, fate, justice, whatever you wanted to call it. The universe had a sense of irony. Her phone buzzed. A text from her husband, David Morrison. Picked up our little tornado. He finger-painted his teacher. We're definitely getting called in for a conference. She smiled, typing back quickly. Is the teacher okay? She's purple. Literally. He's very thorough. That's my boy. Her boy. Ethan James Chen Morrison. 3 years old, brilliant, exhausting, and the absolute center of her universe. He had her eyes and her determination, but his smile was all his own, a pure expression of joy she was determined to protect from the harsh realities she'd faced. The irony, the secret she'd kept locked away for 3 years, was that Ethan's biological father was successful, powerful, and had no idea his son existed. It had been one night, one conference in Boston, where she and Marcus had stayed late working on a presentation. Too much wine, too much proximity, too many years of unspoken tension. She'd known it was a mistake even as it happened, and the next morning, Marcus had made it clear it would never be repeated. What happened last night stays in Boston. We're professionals, Miss Chen. Let's keep it that way. So she had. And when she'd discovered she was pregnant 6 weeks later, she'd made a choice. Tell Marcus and watch him pressure her to terminate, or leave and build a life on her own terms. The decision had been easier than she'd expected. She'd already seen how he treated people he considered obligations. Her child would never be anyone's burden. David had entered her life a year later, a kind, steady man who'd fallen in love with both her and Ethan. He'd adopted Ethan legally 6 months into their marriage, giving him a father who showed up, who cared, who chose them every single day. As far as Lily was concerned, David was Ethan's father in every way that mattered. But now, sitting in this office with acquisition documents spread across her desk, she knew the past was about to collide with the present in spectacular fashion. In 2 weeks, Meridian would finalize its acquisition of Ashford Industries. Marcus would report to her. His empire would become a subsidiary of hers. And somewhere in all the legal paperwork and corporate restructuring, there was a 3-year-old boy who had no idea his world was about to get complicated. Rachel knocked again. Ms. Chen, your 4 o'clock is here. Mr. Ashford from Ashford Industries. Lily's heart stuttered. He's early. And that meeting isn't until next week. He insisted. Says it's urgent. Rachel's expression was carefully neutral, but Lily caught the hint of concern. Should I have security escort him out? No. Lily stood, smoothing her charcoal suit, and checked her reflection in the window. The woman looking back was different from the one who'd left Marcus's office 3 years ago. Older, harder, polished to a diamond edge. Send him in. The door opened and Marcus Ashford stepped into her office with the confidence of a man who'd never learned to knock. He'd aged in 3 years, new lines around his eyes, more gray in his hair, but he still carried himself like royalty. His suit probably cost $10,000. His shoes were Italian leather, and his expression, when he saw her, went from arrogant to utterly frozen. Miss Chen. It's Mrs. Morrison now. Or Ms. Chen if you prefer professional courtesy. She didn't offer her hand, didn't smile, just gestured to the chair across from her desk. You're early for our meeting. He didn't sit. Instead, he stared at her like she was a ghost, or maybe a nightmare that had come to life. You're the COO of Meridian. You're the one orchestrating this acquisition. I am. She sat down, forcing him to either sit as well or loom over her like a bully. After a moment, he sat, still looking shell-shocked. Is that a problem, Mr. Ashford? You could say that. He leaned back, trying to regain his composure, that mask of control sliding back into place. 3 years ago, you walked out of your job. No notice, No professionalism, just quit in the middle of a conversation. Now you're here, in a position to dismantle everything I've built. Forgive me if I'm suspicious of your motives. My motives are profit and growth, same as any COO. Ashford Industries has good bones but terrible leadership. We intend to fix that. By replacing me, by repositioning you. You'll remain as president of the Ashford division, reporting to me. Your salary and benefits will actually improve. You should be grateful. The word grateful hung between them like a blade. Marcus's hands tightened on the armrests of his chair. I built that company. My name is on the building. And now you expect me to report to someone who couldn't handle being my assistant? No. Lily's voice could have cut glass. I expect you to report to someone who refused to be treated like a disposable tool. There's a difference, though I wouldn't expect you to understand it. This is personal. This is business. You taught me that, remember? When you told me my pregnancy was poor planning and gave me an ultimatum. When you said pride doesn't pay rent. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Your financial reports for the last 3 years. Revenue down 23%. Stock value dropped 40%. 3 sexual harassment lawsuits settled quietly. A public relations disaster when you were photographed leaving a hotel with Councilman Bradley's daughter, who was 19 at the time. Should I continue? Marcus's jaw worked silently. She'd never seen him speechless before. It was oddly satisfying. You made choices, Mr. Ashford. You prioritized your ego over your company. You burned through 12 executive assistants in 3 years, none lasting more than 6 months. You alienated your board, your investors, and your employees. I didn't destroy your empire. You did that all by yourself. And you're here to pick up the pieces. I'm here to build something better. With or without you. She opened her laptop, signaling the conversation was ending. The acquisition goes forward in 2 weeks. You can fight it and lose everything, including your position and your dignity. Or you can accept it and maintain some level of control over your legacy. Your choice. He stood, and for a moment, she saw something flicker across his face. Not quite regret, but something close. Recognition, maybe, of who she'd become, or who she'd always been under his tyranny. I underestimated you. Most people do. That's their mistake, not mine. She looked up, meeting his eyes with cold satisfaction. See yourself out, Mr. Ashford. I have actual work to do. He left without another word, and Lily waited until the door closed before letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking. 3 years of preparation, of building herself into someone who couldn't be dismissed or destroyed, and it still felt like walking through fire. Her phone buzzed. David again. Ethan wants to know if you can read him the Dragon book tonight. Also, he asked why daddies go to work, but mommies are already at work when daddies wake up. I told him you're a superhero. She smiled through unexpected tears. Tell him I'll read him 2 Dragon books. And yes, mommy is definitely a superhero. He knows. We all know. Love you. Love you too. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the office in shades of orange and gold. In 2 weeks, everything would change. Marcus would walk into this building as her subordinate. He'd see her name on the organizational chart above his. He'd take orders from the woman he'd once dismissed as insufficient. But tonight, she'd go home to her little boy and her husband, read Dragon books and help with bath time, and remember why she'd fought so hard to get here. Not for revenge, though that was sweet. For security. For respect. For the chance to show her son that being kind didn't mean being weak, and that standing up for yourself was worth any cost. She packed up her briefcase, grabbed her coat, and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection one more time. The woman looking back was smiling. Really smiling. For the first time in 3 years. The acquisition party was held at the Platinum Room, one of those exclusive Manhattan venues where the champagne cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. Meridian had spared no expense, transforming the space into a celebration of corporate dominance wrapped in elegant restraint. Ice sculptures, string quartet, waiters gliding through crowds with trays of delicacies most guests couldn't pronounce. Lily arrived fashionably late, David at her side in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. They'd left Ethan with her mother, who'd been thrilled to have her grandson for the night, and had promised only minimal sugar before bedtime, a promise Lily knew would be broken within the first hour. "You ready for this?" David squeezed her hand as they entered. He knew the whole story, had held her while she'd cried, remembering those early days of pregnancy when she'd been terrified and alone. He'd been furious when she'd told him about Marcus's ultimatum, had wanted to file lawsuits or at minimum punch the man in his perfectly straight nose. But Lily had asked him to let it go, to let her handle it her way. Tonight was her way. "I'm ready." She smoothed her dress, a midnight blue creation that made her look like power itself. Her hair was up, her makeup perfect, and her 4-inch heels brought her closer to eye level with men who were used to looking down on women. "Let's make an entrance." They moved through the crowd like dancers who'd rehearsed their steps. David was a natural at these events, charming without being fake, interested without being intrusive. He'd been a consultant before taking a position at a non-profit, so he understood the corporate game but wasn't consumed by it. People gravitated toward him, which meant they gravitated toward her, and within 15 minutes, Lily had worked the room more effectively than if she'd gone alone. Marcus saw her before she saw him. She felt his gaze like heat across her skin, that old awareness she'd spent years trying to forget. When she finally turned and met his eyes across the room, something shifted in the air. He was with a blonde woman young enough to be his daughter, his hand possessively on her waist, but his attention was entirely on Lily. "That's him, isn't it?" David murmured, following her gaze. "The infamous Marcus Ashford, in the flesh." Lily took a champagne flute from a passing waiter, more for something to hold than to drink, and his latest accessory. "She looks miserable." He was right. The blonde's smile was painted on, her eyes distant, her body angled slightly away from Marcus even as he held her close. Lily recognized the look. She'd worn it herself once, that mask of compliance hiding desperation underneath. "Miss Chen." The voice came from behind her. Gerald Thornton, Meridian's CEO and her direct superior. He was 65, silver-haired, and sharp as a tack despite his grandfatherly appearance. "Excellent turnout. The board is very pleased with how smoothly this acquisition has proceeded." "Thank you, sir. The Ashford team has been surprisingly cooperative." Surprising is one word for it. Gerald's eyes flicked toward Marcus. "I heard he showed up at your office unannounced last week. Any problems?" "Nothing I couldn't handle." Lily smiled, the expression practiced and perfect. "He needed to understand the new hierarchy. I made it clear." "I'm sure you did." Gerald sipped his scotch, studying her with those calculating eyes that had built an empire. "You know, when I hired you, several board members questioned the decision. Said you were too young, too inexperienced for COO. I told them they were idiots who couldn't recognize talent if it bit them on their overpriced ties." David chuckled. Lily felt warmth spread through her chest. "I appreciate your confidence, sir. You've earned it. This acquisition was your strategy, your execution. Ashford Industries was hemorrhaging money, but you saw the potential underneath. That's vision." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "But I need to ask, is there any personal history between you and Marcus Ashford? Anything that might complicate things moving forward?" Lily had prepared for this question, had rehearsed her answer until it sounded natural. "I worked as his executive assistant briefly, several years ago. It didn't end well. But that's ancient history, and I'm a professional." "Briefly. That's a diplomatic way of putting it." Gerald's eyes twinkled. "I did my research, Lillian. You lasted 3 years in a position where most people burned out in 6 months. You left abruptly, and he went through a dozen replacements trying to find someone half as competent. The man clearly didn't appreciate what he had." He didn't. The words came out harder than she'd intended. David's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. "But that's his pattern. He uses people until they're no longer useful, then discards them. It's why his company was failing. And now you're in a position to teach him a better way." Gerald raised his glass. "To justice, karma, and the long game." May we all be smart enough to recognize talent before it walks out the door. They clinked glasses, and Lily felt something settle inside her. Validation, maybe. Or just the satisfaction of knowing she'd been right to leave, right to fight, right to believe in herself when no one else had. The evening progressed in waves of conversation and networking. Lily spoke with board members, investors, journalists covering the acquisition. Everyone wanted to know the story of the young COO who'd orchestrated such a brilliant takeover. She gave them the sanitized version, the one where ambition and strategic thinking were the only plot points. But Marcus was a presence she couldn't ignore, always in her peripheral vision. She watched him work the room with practiced charm, saw how people still deferred to him despite his reduced position. He'd built his reputation over decades. It would take more than one acquisition to tear it down completely. Around 9 o'clock, David excused himself to take a call from Lily's mother. "Ethan's fine, but he wants to say goodnight to Mommy," he explained, kissing her cheek. "I'll be right back." Lily nodded, watching him step onto the balcony with his phone. The moment he left, she felt the shift in energy. Marcus was moving toward her, cutting through the crowd with purpose. The blonde was nowhere to be seen, probably dismissed to wait in the car like an obedient pet. "Mrs. Morrison?" His voice was smooth, controlled, but she heard the edge underneath. "Enjoying your victory party?" "It's not a victory party, Mr. Ashford. It's a celebration of new beginnings." She met his eyes without flinching. "For both our companies." "Is it?" He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and familiar. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you orchestrated this entire acquisition as revenge. Tell me, how long have you been planning this? Since the day you walked out of my office?" "You give yourself too much credit. I spent the last 3 years building a career, not plotting revenge. The fact that our paths crossed again is simply coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidence." His jaw tightened. "You knew Meridian was targeting Ashford Industries. You could have recused yourself, let someone else handle the acquisition. Instead, you put yourself in charge of dismantling my company." "I'm not dismantling anything. I'm restructuring, modernizing, and hopefully salvaging what's left of your reputation. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" He laughed, the sound bitter. "For what? For humiliating me in front of the entire business community? For reducing me to a subordinate after I built an empire? For proving that walking out 3 years ago was the best decision you ever made?" "It was." The words hung between them, sharp and true. "Working for you was slowly destroying me. You demanded perfection but gave nothing in return. No respect, no appreciation, not even basic human decency. You treated me like a machine that occasionally malfunctioned. So yes, leaving was the best decision I ever made. It led me here, to a life where I'm valued and respected, where my contributions matter, where I'm not just someone's disposable assistant." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. "I valued you. You were the best assistant I ever had, and yet you fired me the moment I became inconvenient. That's not value, Marcus. That's utility. There's a difference." She paused, watching emotions play across his face like shadows. "You told me I'd regret leaving. That pride doesn't pay rent. But you were wrong. Pride gave me strength. It helped me survive those first months when I was terrified and alone. It pushed me to work harder, be smarter, prove that I was more than just someone who fetched your coffee and fixed your mistakes. So no, I don't regret leaving. I regret staying as long as I did." The silence between them was electric. Around them the party continued, oblivious to the small war being waged in hushed tones. A waiter offered them appetizers. Music swelled from the quartet. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke that probably wasn't funny. "You said you were terrified and alone." Marcus's voice had changed, some of the anger bleeding into something else. Curiosity, maybe, or concern he didn't want to admit. "What happened after you left? That's none of your business. Humor me." "Why?" Lily tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle she'd already solved. "So you can feel better about yourself. So you can pretend you care retroactively. It doesn't work that way, Marcus. You don't get to be interested in my life now that I'm successful. You had your chance to see me as a person 3 years ago. You chose not to. You're right. The admission seemed to cost him something. His shoulders dropped slightly, the armor cracking. I was a bastard to you. To everyone. I convinced myself it was necessary, that being ruthless was the only way to stay on top. But looking at where I am now, and where you are, maybe I was just afraid. Afraid of what? Of being human. Of admitting I needed people. Of showing weakness. He looked away, out over the glittering crowd. My father was a tyrant. He taught me that kindness was weakness, that emotions were liabilities. I built my entire life around those principles. And now I'm 45 years old, running a failing company, reporting to someone I once fired, and I can't remember the last time I had a genuine conversation with anyone. Lily felt something twist in her chest. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition of the damage people did to themselves in the name of success. That's sad, Marcus. But it's also a choice you made every single day. You chose cruelty over kindness, power over connection, and now you're alone with your empire crumbling around you. I don't feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for the person you could have been if you'd been brave enough to be human. David returned before Marcus could respond, his presence immediately shifting the dynamic. He moved to Lily's side with casual possessiveness, his hand finding hers naturally. Sorry about that. Ethan wanted to tell you about the dragon he drew. Apparently it has 17 legs and breathes sparkle fire, whatever that means. Lily's entire expression transformed. The hardness melted into pure warmth, and she laughed, genuinely delighted. 17 legs. That's very specific. He counted. Twice. David looked at Marcus for the first time, extending his free hand with easy confidence. David Morrison. You must be Marcus Ashford. My wife has told me a lot about you. Marcus shook his hand, his expression carefully neutral. But Lily saw the calculation in his eyes, processing the word wife and everything it implied. All terrible things, I'm sure. Actually, she rarely mentions you. David's smile was friendly, but his grip was probably firmer than necessary. She's too busy being brilliant and raising our son to dwell on the past. Your son? Marcus's eyes flicked to Lily. I didn't know you had a child. Why would you? Lily kept her voice light, casual, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment she'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. You made it clear 3 years ago that my personal life was irrelevant as long as it didn't interfere with work. So I took that lesson to heart. My family is none of your concern. How old? The question came out before he could stop it, and Lily saw the exact moment he started doing math in his head. Your son. How old is he? 3. She met his eyes, daring him to push further. He'll be 4 in December. The silence stretched. Marcus stood frozen, his expression shifting through shock, confusion, calculation. December. That would mean conception in March, 3.5 years ago, right around the time of the Boston conference. David, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued cheerfully. Best thing that ever happened to us. Well, second best. Marrying Lily was first. But Ethan's a close second. Kid's brilliant, exhausting, and currently convinced he's going to grow up to be a dragon trainer. He checked his watch. Actually, we should probably head out soon. My mother-in-law is wonderful, but Ethan can be a handful at bedtime. Of course. Lily forced herself to move, to smile, to maintain the facade even as she felt Marcus's gaze burning into her. It was good seeing you, Mr. Ashford. I'll see you Monday morning for our strategic planning meeting, 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. She walked away before he could respond. David's arm around her waist, her head held high. But she felt Marcus watching them leave, felt the weight of questions he couldn't ask, accusations he couldn't make, revelations hovering just out of reach. In the car, David finally noticed her tension. You okay? You're shaking. I'm fine. Just exhausted. She leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights blur past. Thank you for being there tonight. For being you. Always. He reached over and squeezed her hand. Though I have to say, Ashford looked like he'd seen a ghost when I mentioned Ethan. Did something happen before I got back? Just the past catching up with the present. Lily closed her eyes. Nothing we can't handle. But they couldn't handle it. Not really. Because Marcus Ashford didn't let things go, and the moment he'd heard Ethan's age, every wall he'd built around that night in Boston had come crashing down. That night. He'd spent 3 years trying to forget it, burying it under work and meaningless relationships, convincing himself it had been a mistake brought on by too much wine and too many late nights. But now, driving through empty streets at midnight, alone in his penthouse-bound car, he couldn't stop doing the math. March, 3.5 years ago. The Boston conference. The presentation that had gone until 2 a.m. The bottle of wine they'd shared while going over numbers one more time. The way she'd laughed at something he'd said. Really laughed. Not the polite professional chuckle she usually gave him. The moment their hands had touched reaching for the same document, and suddenly the air had changed. He'd told himself the next morning it meant nothing. That professionals could compartmentalize. That what happened in Boston stayed in Boston. And when she'd quit 2 months later, pregnant and desperate, he'd been too focused on his own anger to connect the dots. She'd never said the father's name. He'd never asked. He'd assumed it was some boyfriend, some random hookup. Anyone but him. Because Marcus Ashford didn't have children. He had a company. That was his legacy. Except now, apparently, he had a 3-year-old son named Ethan who drew dragons with 17 legs and called another man daddy. The penthouse was dark and cold when he arrived. $60 million worth of real estate, and it felt like a tomb. Marcus poured himself a scotch and stood at the window, looking out over the city that had once seemed like his kingdom. His phone buzzed with messages he ignored. Then, after staring at the screen, he did something he hadn't done in years. He opened his email and started typing. Miss Chen, I need to speak with you. Not about business, about Boston, about Ethan. I think we both know there's a conversation we've been avoiding. I'll be at Riverside Park tomorrow at 10 a.m., by the fountain. Please come. Marcus. He hit send before he could change his mind. Across town, Lily sat in Ethan's room watching him sleep. His dark curls spread across the pillow, one hand clutching his stuffed dragon. He had her eyes, her chin. But his smile had Marcus's charm. She'd spent 3 years pretending she didn't see the resemblance. David appeared in the doorway. You've been in here for an hour. Talk to me. He suspects. Marcus. He figured out the timeline. And what are you going to do? I don't know. She stood, tucking Ethan's blanket around him. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell. He had his chance 3 years ago. But Ethan might want to know him someday. David's words were careful. I'm not going anywhere. I'm his father. But this isn't about what we want. It's about what's fair to Ethan. You're too good. Lily wrapped her arms around him. The idea of that man having any claim to our son makes me want to punch walls. I know. But lying to Ethan feels wrong. David kissed her forehead. Talk to Marcus. Set boundaries. You're not that scared assistant anymore. You're a force of nature. Her phone buzzed. An email from Marcus. She read it twice, then showed David. Well, at least he's not pretending anymore. Should I go? That's your call. But if you do, I'm coming with you. Not to the actual conversation, but nearby. Lily typed a response. Fine. 10 a.m. Come alone. She hit send and turned off her phone. Tomorrow would be soon enough. The morning dawned clear and cold. Lily dressed carefully, jeans and a cashmere sweater, her armor for facing the past. David drove her to Riverside Park with Ethan in the back seat, oblivious to the tension. Marcus was already there, standing by the fountain in jeans and a leather jacket that made him look more human, less corporate tyrant. He saw her approaching and straightened. Then his eyes landed on David and Ethan, and his entire face changed. Ethan was chasing leaves, his laughter carrying across the park, pure joy and motion. I'll be at the playground. David kissed her cheek. You've got this. Marcus watched David carry Ethan toward the swings, then turned to Lily. "He's mine, isn't he?" "Ethan, he's my son." Lily could have lied, but standing there in the morning sun, she found she didn't want to. Biologically, yes. David is his father in every other sense. Marcus sat down heavily on the fountain's edge. "Boston. That night we worked late. Yes. And when you told me you were pregnant, I gave you an ultimatum." He couldn't finish, horror written across his face. "You told me to choose between my job and my baby." "I left, Marcus. I protected my child from you because I knew exactly what kind of father you'd be. Absent, critical, resentful. Ethan deserved better. I would have wanted him. If I'd known..." "What?" "You would have pressured me to terminate. Or offered money to disappear. I've seen how you treat obligations." She sat beside him, maintaining distance. "You want to know what the last 3 years were like? I worked 2 jobs while pregnant, gave birth alone, lived in a studio apartment, got rejected from 95 jobs because of the gap in my resume. But I survived. I found David, who loved us without conditions. I clawed my way up. I did all that without you, because of you, despite you. I'm sorry." The words sounded foreign from him. "I know that's not enough, but I need you to know I'm genuinely sorry. I was wrong about everything. Why are you sorry now? Because you realized Ethan is yours, or because you actually understand what you did?" "Both." He ran a hand through his hair. "Seeing you at the party, seeing what you've become, it made me realize what I threw away. Not just a brilliant assistant, a person who cared about me despite everything. You weren't blind. You just didn't think I mattered. You're right. And I hate that you're right." He stood, pacing. "I've spent 3 years destroying relationships because I couldn't be vulnerable. My father taught me that love was weakness, that emotions were liabilities. I followed those rules perfectly and ended up alone and bitter, just like him. He died 3 years ago, 2 weeks after you quit. I didn't cry at his funeral because he'd taught me tears were for losers." Lily felt something twist in her chest. Understanding, maybe. "That's sad. But it's not an excuse. You had a choice. You chose cruelty over kindness every single time. I know, and I chose wrong." He deflated. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking to be part of Ethan's life, though, God, I want that more than anything. I'm asking for a chance to prove people can change. People can change. But it requires work." Lily watched Ethan on the swings. If you want any relationship with Ethan, you have to understand some things. David is his father. That doesn't change. You don't get to disrupt our lives. And you have to prove you've changed through therapy, making amends, learning to be human instead of successful. I'll do it. All of it. And if you hurt him, I will destroy you. Not as your boss, but as someone who loves that boy more than life itself. Do you understand?" "I understand. I swear, Lily, I'll do everything to be worthy of knowing him. This doesn't happen fast. You exist in his periphery while we watch you prove you've changed. Maybe in 6 months, maybe a year, we let you meet him. Only if you've done the work. How do I prove it? Start by being decent to people at work. Learn their names, ask about their families, say thank you. Be someone people respect instead of fear." She stood. "And Marcus, see a real therapist. Deal with your father issues, all of it. Ethan doesn't need another damaged person in his life." She walked to the playground where David was helping Ethan on the climbing structure. Marcus sat by the fountain, watching them, his expression unreadable but his posture radiating loss. 6 months later, Meridian's quarterly report was a triumph. Ashford Industries had exceeded every projection under Lily's leadership, and Marcus had been named in industry articles as an example of leadership transformation. Lily read the latest piece in her office. Journalists had interviewed his staff, people who talked about the change, how he'd started listening in meetings, apologized to people he'd mistreated, implemented flexible working policies, showed up at a junior analyst's hospital bedside, not to pressure her about work, but to offer support. Either Marcus was the world's best actor, or he'd actually meant what he said. When Marcus arrived for their quarterly meeting, he thanked Rachel by name and asked about her daughter's soccer tournament. Rachel looked stunned. "Your reports are impressive," Lily said once they were alone. "Revenue up 18%, employee retention up 32%. Turns out treating people like humans is good for business." His smile was self-deprecating. "Who knew?" "I did. You told me I was being emotional when I suggested better parental leave policies." I remember a lot of things that make me sick now." Lily studied him, looking for manipulation. All she saw was genuine remorse. "You're doing good work, Marcus. Real work. I'm trying. Not because I want something, but because it's right, and because I want to be the kind of man my son could be proud of, even if he never knows I exist." They'd had several meetings, but Marcus had never brought up Ethan directly until now. Lily took a breath. "David and I have been talking." She pulled out her phone, showing him a photo from last week. Ethan in a tiny cap and gown, grinning at his preschool graduation. Marcus stared like it was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. He's beautiful. He looks happy. He is happy. Loved, secure, smart, exhausting. Lily locked her phone. "His school is doing a spring festival next month. If you're interested, you could come, not as his father, as a colleague from work who wanted to meet him." Marcus looked like he might cry. "Are you serious?" "I'm serious. But you don't get to tell him who you are. No expensive gifts, no disrupting his life. You get to be a friendly adult who plays games and goes home. Can you handle that?" "I can handle it. I swear. I'll follow whatever rules you set." "Then come to the spring festival, 1 p.m., Riverside Preschool. Bring your ability to play beanbag toss and nothing else. I'll be there. Thank you for believing people can change." The spring festival was beautiful chaos. 300 children, dozens of parents, games everywhere. Lily and David arrived with Ethan, who was vibrating about face painting. Marcus showed up exactly on time, nervous and afraid. David saw him first and stiffened, but Lily squeezed his hand. "Ground rules," David said quietly. "You don't mention being his father. You don't promise anything you can't deliver. You don't try to one-up me. If anyone gets uncomfortable, you leave. Understood?" Marcus extended his hand and David shook it, both men sizing each other up. Ethan ran over, his face painted like a tiger. "Mommy! Daddy! Look! Roar!" "You're terrifying." Lily crouched down. "Ethan, this is my friend Marcus. He wanted to meet you." Ethan looked up at Marcus with that frank child stare. "Why?" Marcus crouched to eye level. "Because your mom told me you're really good at drawing dragons." "I like dragons. I'm really good. I draw them with lots of legs. Sometimes 17. 17 legs, that's specific. It's the right number. Absolute certainty. Do you like face painting?" "I've never tried it." Ethan's eyes went wide with horror. "Never? Not even once? You should be a dragon. Come on." He grabbed Marcus's hand and started dragging him toward the booth. "I'll show you the best colors." Marcus looked back, expression caught between terror and wonder. Lily nodded permission. David wrapped an arm around her. He just grabbed his hand. "He's 3. He doesn't know complicated things like resentment. He just knows Marcus likes dragons."
They watched Ethan supervise Marcus getting his face painted. When finished, Marcus had scales across his cheeks and horns on his forehead. Ethan looked delighted. "Now we match. We're both dragons." They spent an hour playing games. Marcus followed Ethan around, letting him explain rules with expert authority. Lily watched Marcus laugh when Ethan's beanbag went wildly off course. Watched him listen when Ethan explained his imaginary dragon kingdom. Watched him defer to David, never overstepping. And Ethan just being himself, happy, curious, kind, treating Marcus with easy friendship, no special significance. As afternoon ended and kids melted down from sugar, Ethan ran to David, arms up. David scooped him up and Ethan nestled into his shoulder, exhausted. Marcus approached slowly, dragon paint smudged. "Thank you for today." It meant everything. "You were good with him." "Natural." "He's amazing. You've both done incredible jobs." Marcus looked at sleeping Ethan. "He's lucky to have parents who love him so much." "We're the lucky ones," David said firmly. "This doesn't change anything. I'm still his dad." "I know, and I'm grateful for even this." Marcus started to leave. "Lily, my therapist asked what I wanted out of this. I told her I want Ethan to have the best life possible. If having me in his life makes it better, I want that. But if distance is what's best, I can accept it too. For the first time, I'm putting someone else's needs above my own." "Keep doing the work, Marcus. We'll see where it goes." Over the following year, Marcus became a careful, respectful presence in Ethan's orbit. He showed up at school events, always in the background, never pushing for attention. He sent birthday cards signed simply, "Your friend Marcus," with hand-drawn dragons that got better with each attempt. He made anonymous donations to Ethan's preschool, funding an arts program when budget cuts threatened to eliminate it, asking only that the donation remain unnamed. And he continued being the kind of leader people actually wanted to work for. His therapy sessions, twice weekly now, were helping him unpack decades of toxic patterns inherited from his father. He'd made amends to former employees, writing letters and making phone calls. Some forgave him, many didn't, and he accepted their anger as the consequence of his actions. He restructured his life around being better rather than being successful, and ironically, success followed anyway. Other companies wanted to work with the new Marcus Ashford, the one who led with empathy instead of fear. Lily watched this transformation with cautious optimism. She'd seen too many people promise change only to revert to old patterns when the pressure mounted. But Marcus seemed different. When a major deal fell through and cost Ashford division millions, he didn't rage or blame his team. He took responsibility in the board meeting, outlined what they'd learned, and thanked his staff for their effort despite the outcome. Gerald Thornton had pulled Lily aside afterward and said, "Whatever you did to that man, bottle it. He's become our best division president. What she'd done was give him a reason to be better. Not for her, not for redemption, but for a little boy who might someday want to know him." On Ethan's 4th birthday, they had a party at the house. Family, a few preschool friends, and at Ethan's specific request, Marcus the dragon man who's good at beanbag toss. When Lily had asked why he wanted Marcus there, Ethan had looked at her with those serious eyes and said, "Because he's my friend, Mummy." Friends come to birthday parties, the simplicity of childhood logic. Marcus wasn't a complicated figure to Ethan. He was just a nice adult who liked dragons and played games and made his mum smile sometimes when she thought no one was watching. Marcus arrived exactly on time, carrying a carefully wrapped gift. Inside was an art set with high-quality markers and coloured pencils, along with a hardcover book about dragons from different cultures around the world. Not too expensive to seem like he was trying to buy affection, but thoughtful enough to show he'd listened to what Ethan loved. The card read, "For the world's best dragon artist. May you always draw with 17 legs, or however many feels right. Your friend, Marcus." Ethan had been delighted, immediately sitting cross-legged on the floor to examine each marker, testing colours on a piece of scrap paper while the party continued around him. Marcus had watched him with an expression Lily recognised. Hunger, not for possession or control, but for connection, for the chance to know this person who shared his DNA but was being raised with all the love and stability Marcus had never experienced as a child. Later, after the cake had been eaten and presents opened and most guests had left with their sugar-high children, Marcus found Lily and David cleaning up in the kitchen. Ethan was in the living room showing his grandmother his new art supplies, his voice carrying as he explained why certain shades of blue were superior for dragon scales. "I need to tell you both something." Marcus's voice was serious enough that both parents immediately tensed, their parent radar activating. "I've been offered a position, CEO of a major tech company in Silicon Valley. They're offering twice my current salary, stock options, the whole package. Everything I would have jumped at without hesitation 3 years ago." Lily felt her stomach drop, that old fear rising. Just when things were stable, just when Ethan was attached, Marcus would leave. It would prove her right that he couldn't commit, that he was still the same selfish man underneath the therapy and good behaviour. And her voice came out harder than she intended, and I turned it down. Marcus smiled slightly, seeing her surprise. I told them I was honoured, but I'm exactly where I need to be. David set down the stack of paper plates he'd been throwing away. That's a significant sacrifice. CEO positions like that don't come around often. It's not a sacrifice, though. That's what I've learned this past year. It's a choice, and it's the right one. Marcus leaned against the counter, looking more relaxed than Lily had ever seen him in professional settings. 3 years ago, I would have taken that job without a second thought. I would have convinced myself that more power, more money, more prestige was what I needed to be happy. But I've had all those things, and I was miserable, successful, powerful, wealthy, and completely hollow inside. He gestured toward the living room where Ethan's laughter rang out as he showed off his new markers. This, being here at a 4-year-old's birthday party, eating cake that's probably 50% food colouring, drawing dragons with crayons on paper tablecloths, maybe being a small but positive presence in a good kid's life, this is worth more than any corner office in Silicon Valley. I've finally figured out what my father never learned, that the stuff that actually matters can't be measured in quarterly earnings or stock prices. Lily studied his face, looking for the lie, for the manipulation, for any sign this was performance. But all she saw was genuine peace, the kind that came from making decisions aligned with your values instead of your ego. You've really changed, haven't you? I'm trying to. Every day. Some days are harder than others. Marcus's expression turned more vulnerable. Last week I had a moment in a meeting where someone challenged my strategy, and my first instinct was to destroy them verbally. Just eviscerate them in front of everyone to prove I was smarter. The old me would have done it without thinking. But instead I took a breath and said, "That's a good point. Let me think about that." And you know what? They were right. Their approach was better than mine. I thanked them publicly and we implemented their strategy. Character growth in action. David's tone had warmed slightly. He'd been the hardest sell on Marcus's transformation, his protective instincts for Lily and Ethan making him suspicious of every gesture. But even he couldn't deny the evidence accumulating month after month. It feels like learning to walk again. Everything I was taught about leadership, about success, about being a man, it was all wrong. Or not wrong for everyone, but definitely wrong for me. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, that gesture of vulnerability Lily remembered from rare moments of honesty years ago. My therapist says I'm reparenting myself. Learning at 45 what I should have learned at 5. How to be kind, how to apologize, how to value people for who they are instead of what they can do for me. Marcus, Lily said carefully, exchanging a glance with David who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. There's something David and I have been discussing for months now. About Ethan, and you, and how to navigate this whole situation as he gets older and starts asking more complicated questions. Marcus went very still, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Okay. The word came out cautious, like he was bracing for impact. He's going to have questions eventually. About genetics, about why he doesn't look exactly like David, about medical history, about where certain traits come from. Lily chose her words with care, aware that she was offering something precious and could snatch it back if she saw any sign of the old Marcus. And we've decided that when he's old enough to understand, probably around 6 or 7 when he's more cognitively mature, we want to tell him the truth. Marcus set down his cup with a hand that trembled slightly. The truth. That David is his dad. His real dad in every single way that matters. The one who changes diapers at 3 a.m. and reads bedtime stories and teaches him to ride a bike and shows up for every scraped knee and bad dream. David's voice was steady but firm, establishing boundaries even in generosity. But that you're his biological father. That you're part of his life because you care about him and because you've worked incredibly hard to become someone worthy of knowing him. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Marcus's eyes were suspiciously bright, and he blinked several times, clearly fighting tears. When he spoke, his voice was rough. You'd tell him. You'd actually let him know that I'm his biological father. We would. Not now, not yet. He's too young to process that kind of complexity. But when he's ready, when he can understand nuance and different types of family structures, yes. Lily felt her own throat tighten. Because the truth matters, even when it's complicated. And because you've proven day after day for over a year now that you're not the man you were 3 years ago, you're someone who's done the genuine, painful work of changing, someone who's shown up consistently, someone who's earned the right to be part of his story. I don't. Marcus stopped, swallowed hard, tried again. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem remotely adequate for what you're offering me. Thank you is plenty, David said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like respect. You've earned this, Marcus. Not through grand gestures or money or manipulation, through small, consistent acts of decency, through showing up when it would have been easier to disappear, through putting Ethan's needs above your own desire for connection. That matters. We'll need ground rules when the time comes. Lily shifted into practical mode, a defense against the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. About what to call you, how much time you spend with him, how we handle questions that will definitely arise. This isn't an invitation to be dad number 2. This is acknowledgement that you're part of his biological reality, and if you continue on this path, potentially a positive adult figure in his life. I understand. Completely. Whatever boundaries you set, whatever rules you establish, I'll follow them. Marcus wiped at his eyes unselfconsciously, no longer worried about appearing weak or emotional. Being Uncle Marcus, being someone he might actually want to know, someone he doesn't have to be ashamed of, that's more than I ever thought possible when I sat by that fountain realizing what I'd lost. Ethan appeared. Marcus, I drew a dragon with 19 legs. Come see? Marcus looked at them, and they nodded. He crouched down. 19. That's better than 17. Show me. Years passed with the strange, beautiful rhythm of a blended family nobody had planned, but everyone had chosen. When Ethan turned 7, bright and curious and full of questions about everything from dinosaurs to quantum physics, to why some families looked different than others, Lily and David knew it was time. They chose a quiet Sunday afternoon, the 3 of them curled up on the couch with hot chocolate and the kind of gentle sunlight that made everything feel safe. David had suggested doing it somewhere public, like a park, but Lily insisted home was better. If Ethan had big feelings, he needed to be in a space where he felt completely secure. Buddy, we need to talk to you about something important, David started, his voice steady despite the nervousness Lily could feel radiating from him. It's about family, and how sometimes families are made in lots of different ways. Ethan, who'd been focused on the marshmallows in his cocoa, looked up with interest. At 7, he was old enough to sense when adults were being serious, and young enough to not yet be cynical about it. Okay. Lily took over, her hand finding David's for courage. You know how babies are made, right? We had that conversation last year. They'd had the age-appropriate version involving eggs and sperm and how babies grew in bellies, prompted by Ethan's classmate's mother being pregnant. Uh-huh. The sperm and the egg meet and then there's a baby. Ethan recited this like a scientist presenting findings. Right. So Daddy is your dad. That will never, ever change. He's the one who chose you, who loves you, who's been there since you were tiny. Lily squeezed David's hand. But the sperm that helped make you, that came from someone else. Someone you know, actually. Ethan's face scrunched up in concentration, processing this information with the seriousness it deserved. Like how Jamie in my class has a mum and a stepmom because her parents got divorced, but both mums love her. Sort of like that, yeah. Except in your case, before you were born, I worked with someone named Marcus, Uncle Marcus. You know him, the one who likes dragons and comes to your school stuff sometimes. Lily watched Ethan's face carefully. He's your biological father. That means his DNA helped make you. But he wasn't ready to be a dad back then, and things were complicated, so Daddy became your father in all the ways that count. The silence that followed felt eternal. Ethan looked at his hot chocolate, then at David, then at Lily, his young brain working through this new information. Finally, he asked the question Lily had been both dreading and expecting. Does Uncle Marcus want to be my dad now? No, sweetie. David pulled Ethan onto his lap, holding him close. I'm your dad. That doesn't change. Uncle Marcus knows that and respects it. He's just someone who cares about you and wants to be in your life in whatever way makes you comfortable. Like an uncle or a family friend or however you want to think of him. So I have a dad and a biological father. Ethan tested the words out, getting used to the concept. Like how we have biological cousins from mum's sister and chosen cousins from your college friends who aren't really related, but we call them cousins anyway. The analogy made both adults smile despite the tension. Exactly like that, Lily confirmed. Cool. Ethan processed for another moment. Does this mean I get extra presents for Christmas? David laughed, the sound breaking the tension. That's not how it works, buddy. Worth asking. Ethan shrugged with 7-year-old pragmatism, then asked the question that really mattered to him. Can Uncle Marcus teach me about business stuff? He's really smart about companies, and you said I can't learn about investing until I'm older, but maybe he could explain it in kid words. And just like that, with the acceptance and flexibility that children possessed before the world taught them to make things complicated, Ethan had integrated this new information into his understanding of family. No drama, no identity crisis, just acknowledgement that love came in different forms, and families could be complex and still be full of care. That evening, after Ethan was asleep, Lily called Marcus. They'd agreed beforehand that she'd let him know how the conversation went, but he'd promised not to push for immediate contact or make it about him. We told him, she said when he answered on the first ring, his hello tense with anticipation. And Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper, and he took it really well. Asked if it meant extra Christmas presents, wanted to know if you'd teach him about investing. Lily smiled despite her own exhaustion. He's not traumatized or confused. He just absorbed it as part of his reality. Kids are amazing that way. She heard Marcus release a shaky breath. Thank you. For telling him. For giving him the truth. For all of it. He might have questioned, so 3 people who had once been defined by pain learned to build something beautiful from broken pieces. Not perfect, but real. Not simple, but honest. And full of love that had been earned through years of hard work and grace. That was family. That was enough.